good evening. I'm going to have everybody sit down so we can get going and have maximum time for questions. We'll let everybody sit down. So I'm Shirley Zane, Sonoma County Supervisor, 3rd District, and this is my office hours. Actually, I've never had office hours like this, so it's kind of funny we called it this, but it's really a town hall meeting to let people come in and talk to us. Thank you for coming out, first of all, tonight. We know this has been a frustrating process. It's been frustrating for us as well. It is a 2-step process. Caroline's going to get a little bit more into that. The representative from Build is here tonight, Lou. David is here from the city of Santa Rosa. Where did you sit? There you are. Victoria is here also from the city council. So we have a lot of representatives. And we are webcasting, so that means that any of your neighbors who couldn't be here tonight, they can go on the county website, and they should go to General Services or what? The Sinead page. Sinead page, okay, and watch it at any time. And we're going to do this tomorrow night too. So if you don't get all your questions answered tonight, you come back tomorrow and answer more questions and ask more questions. We have some food over here and coffee. Please help yourself anytime. Yes. But if you do come back tomorrow night, please go back online and register for a ticket. Yeah. Yeah. So anyway, so, with that, I'm not going to say much else other than the fact that I'm here to answer any questions if you have a question of me. We were successful in getting a couple extra weeks. I pushed for that at yesterday's board meeting. I want to know that I didn't get a lot of letters, but the few that I got said, hey, 5 days isn't enough. Well, I couldn't agree more. So a couple more weeks. The frustrating part is that, the county has this narrow road, and we have to stay within our lane, and the development part of the property actually is going to go over to the city. So this is a sale of the land, and that can be frustrating in terms of understanding. Yes? I just did. I didn't call her Councilmember Fleming, though, which I apologize. And the reason why I didn't, Victoria, is because I knew I was going to slaughter David's last name because there's 2 David Guins at the Guin and Go. So I'm always afraid to Gwine. I know, and I'm always afraid to call you the other. So anyway, that was just a name fear. So Gary's here with us tonight, and he's going to go ahead and walk us through kind of the agenda. And again, I want to thank you for coming out. Please stay engaged. It's a long process. I understand that, and it's often very frustrating as well. And Chris is here tonight. Okay, wave to Chris. Who is Chris? You're going. Who is this person? Chris Godley, which is really an interesting name for somebody who runs emergency services. But I don't know how that happened. But Chris Godley runs the county emergency services. And I see Paul back here also from Santa Rosa Fire. So thanks for being here, Paul. And he is going to be able to talk a little bit, too, about the thing that has concerned me as much as it concerns you, which is evacuation routes and building more housing up here and threat of wildfire and whatnot. So I thank you for being here. And I'm going to pass it over to Gary.
Great. Thank you, Supervisor Zane. My name is Gary Hockman. I've been asked to facilitate this meeting. We did a few others in March, April timeframe. I happen to be a Hidden Valley resident as well, so have a stake in the game like many of you do. I want to share with you what we're going to do over the next 90 minutes or so. We really have 2 broad objectives. One is to make sure that the county communicates clearly information to the community. And the other is that the county listened to the community. So both your questions as well as your perspectives, needs, and inputs. So the 2 broad objectives, and we think we have enough time to do both tonight. So here's where we're going with the evening agenda. We have about a few minutes here where we're going to do table introductions, so you get a chance to meet your neighbors if you don't already know the people at your table, and share an initial perspective, i.e. why you came tonight, why you gave up an evening to come to this meeting. And then we'll move into the presentations. And like Supervisor Zane said, Caroline Judy from the county, from General Services, will have the bulk of that presentation. And then you'll meet Lou Vasquez from Build Inc. And then you'll also hear from David from the city. And Chris will be available to answer questions later. But you'll hear some presentations, roughly 30 minutes. At the end of that 30 minutes, we're going to turn it over to you to talk at your tables, generate questions, and prioritize those questions. We may not be able to get to everybody's in this room, but we can post answers on the website as well. But this way we make sure we get the important questions from you at the tables. We'll also give you an opportunity to identify any inputs or perspectives, and we'll pass the mic to the table so everybody can share those as well. But you'll be asked later to pick a reporter at the table, and when the mic comes to your table, share those questions and suggestions with the rest of the room. So it's a pretty deliberate process designed to have all of you participate at one point or another versus a couple of you participate and the rest of you watch. At the end of the Q&A, we'll wrap up, and the plan is to end at 7. We promised an hour-and-a-half meeting, so that's the plan. All righty? So let me suggest to you, too, a few ground rules we have tonight. And they're over there written in black above Chris's head. With green, it says ground rules. The first is to balance your participation with others. We're going to have an opportunity to talk at the tables, and some of us naturally lean in and want to share a lot, and others lean back. But this will be a chance for everybody to share some perspective or ask questions at your table. The second is to acknowledge that we have a wide range of perspectives in the room. We have people who came here excited. We have people who came here frustrated. We have people who came here confused. And we want to acknowledge and respect those. That means listening to everybody as well. The third is go after the issues, not people. And I know when we're frustrated, it's easy to blame. But here we're really trying to get clear, understand people's needs, and hear your questions. And to the extent that you're frustrated, say so, but let's work the issues, not point fingers at people. The fourth is because we have a lot of people here, I'm going to ask that just the person with the mic, when we pass the mic, is the one that's talking. If you have something you just got to jump up and say, please raise your hand. At least I can acknowledge you versus having a bunch of people talking at once. And then the last one is make the most of the opportunity. The county's really trying to engage people in this process and get people involved, get your questions, get involvement, and so make the most of it. It's kind of nice to have a community meeting and to be able to do it in a real civil and kind of fun way, frankly. So do what you can to make the most of it. All right, so we're going to do a quick round of table introductions so you know who you're sitting with tonight, and we're just going to do that for 5 minutes, all right? At the table, by the way, you have some facilitators. Facilitators, raise your hand. And these are volunteers from the county who are being asked to keep the process on track, basically. Just make sure everybody has a chance to talk. Oh, yes, we have several extra seats. Come on down. We have seats up here. Hi, Betsy. How you doing? Good. So what I'd like you to do is to go around at your table, just 5 minutes per table, share a little bit about yourself, so your name, where you live, that sort of thing. And then secondly, why did you give up time this evening to come? What's important to you about being here? And you only have 5 minutes at your table, so that's less than 1 minute per person. All right? Ready? Go. thank you very much for taking time to do that. I'm going to turn over now to our first speaker, who is Caroline Judy. She's the Director of General Services for the county, and she told me it was fine if you found your way over to the food table and help finish some of the lavash and cookies. They're there for you. So here you go, Caroline.
Thank you very much for coming. I really appreciate it. I'm really excited to see so many people in this room. That means that you are very interested and engaged, and that's what we want. We are here to try to provide some information, but also to listen, as the supervisor said. We know that there are many concerns about what ultimately will go on this campus, and we know that it's really frustrating for many people that we don't have all the answers to your questions. But with that said, I'm going to try to talk a little bit about where we are in the process, what we have in front of us, and some of the benefits and the opportunities that we see. And I think that's one of the takeaways that I hope that you have from today's meeting, is that this is really an incredible opportunity. It's not very often that a county has this much land that we are able to use for a higher and better purpose than having it used for government institutional purposes. This is a pretty unique thing in the state of California to have this opportunity, and I feel really excited about that. I feel really excited that as a community, we have the opportunity to turn this property into something that is a much more valuable community asset, and I don't want us to lose sight of that. So thank you so much for all being here, for everyone for being here. Really, this is a continuation of a process that began a number of years ago, and for those of you who saw yesterday's presentation or heard it, this is going to be very similar. But so over 15 years ago, Sutter Health told the county that they were intending to not renew their lease, and that started a whole series of conversations, both internally within my department and then with the Board of Supervisors and some in public, about how this property would be utilized. This conversation has been going on for 15 years, you know, slowly winding itself forward. But it's a long-term conversation. And so what we did yesterday is we brought forward a recommendation to the Board of Supervisors for an award in a sale process. So this is part of a solicitation process to find a buyer for the property. So we brought a recommendation for award, and the board said, with Supervisor Zane leading, hey, let's wait, let's slow down a little bit, because of some of the community concerns that we heard, that people hadn't had enough time to really sit with the bids or understand exactly what it all meant. So we're slowing down for couple of weeks, and then we'll bring it back over for the board to make a decision, because we do need to make a decision. We need to make a decision about this property. It is costing all of us a lot of money, and we want to see it utilized for a higher and better purpose. So at the outset, I just want to be very, very clear. This is a recommendation for award and a property sale, and it's consistent with the California Surplus Property Act, which is the legislation that we have to use and have to follow, the rules, the government code that we have to follow when we are surplusing land. And I'm going to talk more about that. Okay. So the Surplus Property Act. The Board of Supervisors, anytime a governmental entity wants to sell land, we have to follow this set of government code rules. And we have to notice affordable housing providers, housing sponsors, parks, schools, cities, tribal entities, other governmental entities that the property is for sale. And that's the very first thing that we have to do. The Board of Supervisors issued that notice in October of last year. And so they said we're going to be surplusing this property. Go ahead, staff, you need to get that notice ready and send it out. And that went out in February. So we sent out that notice to over 600 different entities who have an interest in housing, parks, schools, et cetera. The Surplus Act, then the legislative intent of that act, and it's been modified over the years, but the legislative intent of that act is to encourage local governments to make property available for housing. And that's in recognition of the crisis that we have in the state of California, and particularly in the coastal areas, that we do not have enough housing. And it's not for all incomes, for all spectrum, but particularly affordable housing. That the cost of living has accelerated so much and property has become so expensive that people can't afford to live in our communities. And that's not a good thing for us in so many different ways. So what the legislative intent is really to create affordable, safe, and valuable places for people to live. That's the intent of the law, and that's what we are following, is the California Surplus Property Act. So please go ahead. So the government code section is 54220. For those of you who haven't read it, who want to read it, that's the section. You can Google that, and if you go CAGC, you'll get right there. We sent out our notice. Our intent here is to create an opportunity for affordable housing, and to really, the challenge that we have, or the mission that we have from the Surplus Act is, it says if you receive interested parties who are interested in buying the property, and you receive multiple offers from housing sponsors, then it says you must follow this criteria to evaluate those between those different interested parties. It sets out a rule and a guideline that we have to follow. We don't have discretion to look outside of the act. We have to follow the act. And so the act gives us two different things, two different metrics. One is the amount of affordability, and the second is the depth of affordability. So, what does that really mean? The amount of affordability is determined by, the act says you have to have 25% of all potential housing units must be set aside as affordable. And affordable has a big range, which is the second part of this definition. It's the degree of affordability. The degree of affordability goes from extremely low income to moderate and medium income. There's a range, and what the act says is that if you receive multiple offers, the second test or the second criteria that you have to use when you evaluate those offers is that the affordable housing must meet at least 80% area median income. So what does area median income mean in Sonoma County and in Santa Rosa? For a family of 4, area median income at 80% is about $86,000. Yeah, $86,000. I find that a little astounding. That is 80%, right? That's considered low income, right? I mean, it's shocking to me. So that's the criteria that we have to use, the amount of affordability and the degree of affordability when we have multiple offers. So let's fast forward. Okay, so our current process timeline, this just gives you kind of a summary of what we've just talked about. We issued the surplus notice in February. We held a series of meetings with Supervisor Zane, she referred to them earlier, in March and April. We received 3 bids on May 10th, and then we put together our county selection committee and considered those bids. That took us a while, and I'll talk about that in a minute. And we entered into negotiations, right? And now, in July, we are going to have several community meetings. And we brought forward yesterday for the board's consideration the award recommendation, which we deferred to August 6th. I want to say the 8th, but the 6th. So that's where we are. We're still, obviously, in 2019, and we hope that we will be able to reach a purchase and sale agreement with our recommended for award entity, which is CalCHA, this year, and then that will start a process where our recommended awardee, CalCHA, will be working with you, will be working with the community, and working with the city of Santa Rosa to determine what goes on this property. So that's what we see. That's going to take a while. That process takes a while, and David's going to talk a little bit about it. But let's go on to the next slide. Okay, so we received 3 bids, one from Oakmont Senior Living, OSL, one from CalCHA, and one from EAH. All 3 are qualified housing sponsors. They're all qualified under the law to build housing. And that's the criteria, the first criteria. We put together our county selection committee, which was, we had representatives from the county administrator's office, and we had executive level staff, county employees, from general services, the Community Development Commission, our auditor controller, tax collector's office, and from county council. And that committee met to read the bids, come up with a set of questions. When we evaluated the bids, we found some things that were missing, and we wrote letters to each of the bidders asking for clarifying information in writing we wanted to receive back. All of this information we have up on our website. If you haven't seen it already, you can access it. After we received those letters, we had a series of meetings where we met directly with each of the proposers, and we asked them additional questions on top of what we had communicated in writing. And then through that process, we scored the 3 different proposals. The scoring information is in the board packet that was yesterday. I'm not going to go into the details of the scoring. The most important thing is that we were following the California Surplus Act, and the California Surplus Act is the predominant criteria that we have to use when we looked at those 3 different bids. So through that process, go ahead, next slide. This is a bit more about evaluation criteria. The Surplus Act requirements are the requirements we have to use, but we also looked at the dollar value of the offer and whether equity was offered or not. We looked at the demonstrated financial capacity, and basically with an eye to, does this organization have the fundamental financial backing and the ability to deliver on what they have said that they would do with their offer? And then we looked at conditions of closing. How much time? How much time does it take? And how much time do they need to do their due diligence? Are there additional things that they want to require of the county that might make it more difficult for us to sell the property? Those are the things that we looked at. And then, as I said, we followed the act. Go ahead. This is a summary slide. It was in yesterday's presentation. There's a lot more material in the board packet if you're interested in it. But you can see the broad details and differences of the 3 different proposals. So Oakmont Senior Living was the highest cash offer. They offered us $8 million. You know, we'll give you $8 million and we'll close in 30 days. And we will serve 25% low income. So they'll meet the threshold. So the requirement under the California Surplus Act. And it would be an entirely rental eventual proposal. That was what they were after. And no equity participation. CalCHA offered $1 cash. And a lot of people said $1. CalCHA is a governmental entity. They are a joint powers authority. And so they're issued from the state of California. It is a typical transaction from one governmental entity to another is I will sell you this property for $1. Yes?
So it's our tax dollars.
Your one tax dollar.
Well, no, because those bonds.
So I'm gonna get to that, okay? Okay. But the answer to that is no, it's not your tax dollars in the bonds. So a $5 million equity advance is something that we asked for in the subsequent negotiations. And then a 90-day close. The proposal from CalCHA is 100% low income. And in their proposal, what they talked about was up to 80%, 1/3, up to 100%, these are area median income, and up to 120%. So that's a pretty potentially broad spectrum, but it's targeting the middle income affordability. unlike the Oakmont Senior Living and unlike the AH offer, which were targeting down at the very low, or extremely low income. This is middle income. So middle income means teachers. It means administrators. It means there are all these different professions that are encompassed. Financial planners. It's the folks that are in our broadest segment of our workforce. That's who falls into this category in Sonoma County. And I got a little emotional yesterday when I was talking about it, and I get a little emotional today, because when we don't provide housing for our workforce, it's damaging to our economy. It's damaging to our lives, to our family lives. Our kids can't live here. Our elderly parents can't live here. And that's not a good thing for us as a society. So I get a little emotional about that. But so that's the middle income group that Cal CHA is proposing. And so EAH offered us, initially they had a higher cash offer, but they proposed to split the cost of demolition with the county. And demolition may be a little challenging, and that's not something the county wanted to do. So in our negotiations with EAH, they offered to bring down their, revise their offer, and instead offer $4 million in cash. No equity participation, a longer 120-day close, allowing them to do more due diligence. And then again, as I mentioned earlier, really focusing on the low, very low income, the 25% low income and below, and rental housing. All three of them, we asked about, is there a path to home ownership? So will you always be rental units and there's no opportunity? And the answer was no. There's a path to home ownership. And so how that all works out is something that will happen down the road when this gets more fleshed out. But that was one of the questions that we heard and saw in some of the correspondence that we received. So let's keep going. Thanks, Carrie. No, not from all three. So let me finish through, and then we can ask questions from the group. So our staff recommendation was to award to Cal CHA as the most successful proposer because they met the criteria most successfully met the criteria under the California Surplus Property Act. They met the degree of affordability requirements, and they met and significantly exceeded the amount of affordable housing by offering 100% affordable. They meet this unaddressed need in this community. When you look at the affordable housing projects that have been authorized by the county and by the cities within Sonoma County, most of those projects are funded at the very low income level. And that's because the state and federal funding sources which support those projects are targeting very, very low income. There aren't very many funding sources that are looking at middle income. And so that's one of the things that's led to this disparity in our community. We don't have enough middle income housing. The community benefits, in addition to the affordable housing, are the fact that the county gets to participate in the upside, improved value of the property. And that wasn't the case with either EAH or OSL's proposals. Having the county have an opportunity to improve in the property, for any of you who have seen the appraised value, and in many of our prior community meetings, there were a lot of questions. People didn't understand why is this land, government institutional here at Chenate, only worth, $6 million or $4 million or, whatever. And the reason is it's government institutional. It's not entitled for development. It's got some uncertainties around it. And so it has a low value. If it goes through the process with the city and is eventually these issues are addressed, then the property has a higher value when it's been improved. And one of the things that we really liked about Cal CHA's proposal and their business model, and Lou can talk a little bit more about the team, but they offered an opportunity for the county to participate in that eventual equity. And it is eventual. It's once bonds have been paid to a certain level. It's not instantaneous. But that we thought was a good thing. You know, it gives us that future benefit. They also offered put forward an extremely experienced team, a team that has, well, CalCHA itself as an organization is a relatively new organization. Build, whom Lou is here and one of the founders of, is an extremely experienced organization. And Catalyst, the folks who are looking at operating eventually, extremely experienced group of people. So that was something else that we looked at and were very impressed by. And then through, as I mentioned, through negotiations, we negotiated a $5 million equity advance and a 90-day due diligence closing, so a shorter closing period. What's unusual about where we are right now is we have an award recommendation. We do not have a contract. We do not have a signed contract. This is it's very unusual for us as an entity to bring forward to our Board of Supervisors a staff recommendation without a contract. We normally do this work behind the scenes, not because we're trying to be secretive and hide things from the public, but because we're trying to negotiate the best deal that we can on behalf of the entire community. We brought this forward to the board in this form so that there would be a greater opportunity for participation and visibility and have your input and to hear from you. We could have come forward with a contract and we didn't. So I just want to make that point, that this was unusual and it was purposely unusual. So I'm going to keep going, and sorry, I'm a little long-winded here. But so what I want to do is now introduce Lou Vasquez, who is our representative of the team. And as I mentioned, he is the founder of Build. And we're very excited for this opportunity.
Thank you. I also wanted to remind everybody that you'll have a chance to ask questions. I know there's probably questions percolating in a lot of you. You can start jotting them down on the white cards if you want, and you'll have a chance when the speakers are done to be able to prioritize those and ask them.
Thank you, Carolyn. Thank you, Supervisor, as well. My name's Lou Vasquez. I'm the founder and principal in Build. We're a 20-year-old now development firm based in San Francisco. I myself am a native of San Francisco. My experience in Santa Rosa, early in my career, I worked for a company called Oxford Development, and I was the project manager for Fountain Grove 1 and 2, right around the corner here, 2 office buildings. So now 32 years later, here I am again. And I'm excited to be here. We think that this is really a game-changing way to build housing in California. Housing in California, housing in Sonoma County, housing in Santa Rosa is critically needed. The deficit in the state is 3.5 million homes. The deficit for affordable housing in this community alone is about 14,000 homes. We come here, I see Sonia shaking her head. We come here without a program. What we put together was an example of what could happen. I love that this is happening. This is how we do development. Our outreach, we come to the community, we ask questions, we build consensus. Consensus doesn't mean everybody gets what they want. Consensus means that there's enough agreement across the board for everyone to be able to support this. Over the last 20 years, we've entitled 13 projects in San Francisco, totaling about 3,000 homes. We have had one dissenting vote in dozens and dozens of Board of Supervisor and Planning Commission meetings. And the way we've done that is by bringing neighborhood support to every one of these meetings. That's what we intend to do here. If we can't do it, we fail. And if we fail, nothing gets built. At least we don't build it. So I'm here to listen. I'm here to answer the questions that I can answer. I can't be real specific because, like I said, there is no plan yet. You know, I've heard the concerns about egress and evacuation. I've heard the concerns about congestion. Those seem to be top of mind, and I understand them. We have no intention of building a project that is going to endanger anybody. We often say that our projects don't end at the property line, and they don't. We reach out into the community, the projects reach out in the community. These are large developments, millions and millions, hundreds of millions of dollars going into them. Part of the benefit of that has to be improving the community around it. That is our mission. Our mission is about placemaking and reaching beyond the property lines. So I'm going to leave it at that, and thank you again for the time.
Thank you. Thank you, Lou. I also want to introduce David Guin, and David is from the city, and the city obviously plays a big part in this too, as the property is on the city, and wanted to invite him just to offer about 3 or 4 minutes just to provide a little bit of context about the city's role in the process.
Great, thank you. My name is David Guin. I'm the Assistant City Manager, so I oversee the planning, building, engineering sections of the city. So I wanted to give you a quick overview of the thought comes up about what happens when it does come to this city. So this is property that we would, in our jurisdiction, that we would entitle. Basically what that means is that a project would walk through, a permit would come into our office. When Lou and his team or whoever gets this project comes up with a plan, it starts the process. It is a fairly lengthy process for a project like this. As you heard before, it's not zoned for housing right now. It's public institutional. So the first thing that has to happen is you have to change the zoning, which means changing the general plan designation. So our general plan already says what this is, and we have to change that to housing. So that's a process unto itself that goes to the full council that would get weighed in on. In addition to that, it would be rezoned. There would be a tentative map, which would basically be a layout of whatever the design of this property would be. Because we are on a hillside, the Santa Rosa does have a hillside development ordinance. It's another way to make sure that we're protecting the integrity of our hillsides in Santa Rosa. So there's a process there that, again, another process. And then there's conditional use permits and some other little minor design review processes. So there's a number of touch points to the public. One of the biggest ones is the environmental element of this. So any housing project of any size, CEQA comes into play. CEQA is the environmental rule that governs how a project impacts the environment in multiple ways. So traffic, air, natural resources. There's a fault through in these areas. A lot of different things that go on. So anybody that develops in California has to show how their project doesn't have an adverse impact to those elements or how they're going to mitigate it. So that's a pretty big effort that takes some time. So everything I just talked about typically takes a project of a magnitude of something in this area or somewhere else in Santa Rosa could take up to 2 years of that process to go through, because it does take a lot of public input, a lot of public meetings. Our council, Councilmember Fleming, and the rest of our city council has an expectation of us to be open and transparent and hold these meetings in a way that engages the community in a constructive way. So that will be something we'll take seriously throughout this process and any other project we have in Santa Rosa. So that's a high-level view of a typical project in Santa Rosa, specifically up in the hillside that we're talking about today.
All right, well, I know there's some pent-up energy and some questions, so let me encourage you to have a brief table conversation, and here's some guidelines to get you through that quite easily. The first is, in a simple go-round, identify the questions that you have. Each of you can identify questions, go around the table, and write those questions, 1 question per white card. All right, but everybody has a chance to ask a question and write down a question, 1 question per white card. If you have a comment, a suggestion, or an input, so this is something you want the county or the city to hear from you, not a question, put that on one of the colored cards. Okay, we have more cards, plenty of cards if you run out. And then as a group, prioritize those 2 stacks you have. The white cards, the questions, and the inputs, because we're going to go around the room and ask you to read them, but you're not going to read them all at once. We want to go, to each table. So you'll start with the most important question you have. And then be prepared to share those when you get called on. Let me encourage you, too, that you pick a timekeeper, somebody just to keep an eye on the time. You only have 10 minutes for this. It's going to go very quick. Somebody to stand up and read the question when the table's called on, and then somebody to keep the conversation moving and keep you on track as a facilitator. So 10 minutes, it'll go pretty quickly. If you have questions, call me over to your table. Yeah, so Chris Godley is here. And we'll have the panelists up here during the Q&A so you can direct your question at a particular presenter as well. All right, 10 minutes, thanks. You have about a minute left. You have about 1 minute left. Please prioritize your questions at your table. Do you all have a question prioritized at your table? Because I'm going to use you as my role models. You guys can be my first table. Okay. Thank you. A lot of good conversation at the table. I'm hopeful you were able to do some prioritization. So now we're going to bring the mic to a table and give the table reporter a chance to ask the question. We're going to invite the panelists back up here who were the presenters before. So Lou, if you would join us. Chris, I think we have a seat for you too. And David and Caroline. And you can just ask the question of the group, in which case they'll determine who's best suited to answer it, or you can name the person you want to answer it. So are you my role model? It's just one question. Yeah. Every table's just going to get one. Yeah, we'll start with one question each.
Okay, my question. This development by CCHA, which is a public agency, is exempt from taxes. So this new development, this proposed taxes, will not generate property taxes to cover infrastructure costs. So how will this be managed by the city or the county?
Great question. Who's up?
So the question was, if the CalCHA as a governmental entity, as a JPA, Joint Powers Authority, when they get through the development process, that the property won't be assessed property taxes. And yes, that's true. And in this case, we have a revenue source, which is property taxes, and we have a public benefit, which is affordable housing. And we are by the California Government Code, the Surplus Property Act, we are to use our surplus land for housing, for affordable housing. That is the public benefit that we are delivering. So yes, we will not have the property tax base as a result of this development. We will have, however, the sales tax that are delivered from people's transactions. We'll have, possessory interest. There are a whole bunch of other areas where we will have revenue streams. So that is, the public benefit is the affordable housing, which is what is needed in this community.
So we were going to raise hands and we'll get to your table, promise, okay? Jim, I got your number.
Why not commit to making the site a park to be used by all the citizens of Santa Rosa and build 500 to 700 units elsewhere where it doesn't impact traffic, public safety, historical buildings, the graveyard, the open space preserve that the county never did their job on finishing?
Great. So why not a park or something?
The California Surplus Property Act, we issued the notice, as I mentioned, to schools, to park districts, to housing sponsors. We received no offers to purchase the property from any park entity. And so that's the reason why we're not looking at a park. We're looking at using the property for affordable housing, which is consistent with the act. You mentioned the open space and the county's commitment to creating the Paulin Creek Preserve and looking at Parcel J. We have a open space easement agreement that will be coming to the Board of Supervisors later this year to preserve Parcel J in perpetuity as open space. So that is coming. We are working on it. It's a multi-agency agreement, which takes a little bit of time. So that is coming forward soon. Yes, yes. You can look at the list of names. There's the list of names of who the surplus notice was sent to is on the website, so you can look through that.
We have a question at this table.
In reviewing the pro forma that was attached to the proposal, there was no offset for the loss of property taxes, including the cost to schools and parks and all those special assessments that are on our property taxes. What, if anything, was done to adjust the pro forma to reflect those additional costs?
So the submitted proposal from CalCHA included a pro forma. That was one of the things that we requested of all of the bidders. The pro forma has a theoretical, because you have to develop a pro forma based on something, but a theoretical property development that a number of units, and forecasted out what would be the cost of constructing, designing, constructing, and permitting, and all those things out for 35 years for the course of a bonds. That pro forma looked at just that, the costs of going through the design and construction and permitting process. It didn't look at the county's property tax base. The property taxes, as you know, are based on land and improvements. And without knowing exactly what those improvements are, how many, what the value is and the number of bedrooms and all of those sorts of things that the assessor uses, without knowing that, it's not possible to figure out what the property tax would be. And as I mentioned, the public benefit of this proposal is the affordable housing. That's where we are, the community is being served through the affordable housing. And that is consistent with California state law, and our requirement is to follow the state law.
Question from this table.
Hasn't been explained today. It was explained yesterday as a structure that we're proposing. Couch is a public agency. It would take title to this property from the county, but it's essentially a transfer, not a sale. We would sell bonds, in private bonds, not public bonds. There was a question earlier of tax dollars. They're private bonds that would fund 100% of the development and construction of these however many units we end up doing. We will do an option agreement with the county to take back the property in 15 years for the assumption of the outstanding debt on the property at that time. After we anticipate 27 to 30 years, when the bonds are paid off, the property reverts to the county. So the property gets the county back with no debt, at no cost, with however many units and all the improvements, all the infrastructure on it at that time. During the life of the bonds, revenue goes first to pay operating costs on the development. Second, it goes to pay the bondholders. And third, any excess revenue beyond that goes to the county. So every dollar of excess revenue goes to the county, and the value of the development at the end of the bond life goes to the county.
My name is Sonia Taylor. As those of you who are involved with the city and county know, I wrote a very long letter. I actually have 15 questions. They are very specific. I am well aware they are not going to be answered in this format. but the property tax question is very important. And there's something that, that upsets me a great deal, and that's when numbers are used to lie or mislead. And I understand that this property, in fact, I spoke to the assessor this morning, this property that we're standing on right now has probably never been assessed. For over 100 years, it has been a public building, government building, or you know, 2 hospitals and then the county. But the lost property taxes, which by the way, 48% of property taxes, not the assessments, not the special taxpayer approved bonds, 48% go to our schools. It could be $2 million a year. It goes up 1% a year. It's compounded. That is an amount of money that I would request be considered by the Board of Supervisors as a cost against the ultimate public benefit of this. The public benefit of affordable housing is great, but I want that number to be identified at least in a general way, and I want the Board of Supervisors to understand that the $400,000 equity at the end is not because we have lost this this is a cost against that money.
Thank you. Question from this table.
No, I think it's been answered.
It's been answered? Okay, go for it, Ken.
My name is Ken Howe. Mine's a very civil question. When will the CEQA process start? Now with the county or later on with the city?
I'm going to say later with the city and pass it to David.
Yeah, once an application and a project's submitted, that's when the CEQA process can start, once we have a project description. So that would be in the city process.
Thank you.
So the property sale is actually exempt under CEQA, just because it's a strict property sale, following the Surplus Act.
Great. Thank you. Question back here.
Wow, that's loud. Our group's question is fairly simple. Will there be any single-family homes for middle-income people? Will there be a grouping of apartments along with single-family homes?
Yeah, you know, we don't know. There's no project here yet. I'm assuming that there will be a variety of densities, including single family, you know, of various sizes and shapes. But that's something that we'll have to design with input from everybody.
All right, question back here.
Yes, I'm Paul Eichhorn. I'm a civil engineer. But during my experience, I found that you need to ask some basic questions. And that is, when you start into land, there's only 2 things there. It's the money or the value of that land, and then the use of it, or the compatibility. And there's lawsuits after lawsuits on it. So my question is, when you come up with these plans, is that compatible for this hillside here? You're in a wildfire zone, you're in a drainage zone with a creek through it, and there's a Rogers Fault back here, and there's a graveyard over here, which we discussed at our table here. So with that type of property, how do you intend to cope with all these problems?
Thank you. Thank you.
You to do it is my serious answer. We hire a full team of civil engineers. We do a full environmental impact report. We do analysis of Priol-Alquist. We look at seismic. We look at fire. We spend millions of dollars and years of time to answer those questions. Well, I don't understand why you're shaking your head.
You can say you're going to take care of these problems, But if somebody goes out there to build, they have to have permission and all kinds of regulations from the city to develop it. And a good city planner would look this thing in 10 minutes and tell you, hey, you're overloading this hillside.
Let me let the good city planner answer that.
Well, technically, I'm a civil engineer too, so yeah. Yeah, so we do require extensive studies because, to your point, we can't let things be built unsafe or something that would harm the environment. So that's what the CEQA process is going to flesh out, is the environmental impacts. The fault is a big one, as you brought up. The wetlands are a big one that you brought up. Traffic's a big one. So all those are things that have to be analyzed and brought forward, and we have to make sure that they're addressed appropriately. If they're not, we won't allow that. And we've had situations where housing projects have come through and haven't complied or haven't shown that their traffic works, and we've denied them. So there's a lot of work that has to happen and to prove it out through the city planning process and then ultimately through the city council process.
Thank you, Dave. We'll come back. We have to get around to
I'm Sue Bolt, and I'm a neighbor of this property. And the question that rose to the top at this table was, did the county sell a density plan with this property transfer? And if so, what is the city going to be required to do?
So first of all, we don't have a sale yet. We have a recommendation for award. So we have not yet sold the property. We hope to, but no, we have not. There's no project at this point. What we have is a proposed award and recommendation that will go to the board in August for approval. But there is no project, as Lou said. That's something that will be developed in collaboration with you all, with the community, and through the city's process.
Great. Thank you. So we're making the rounds. I think we've gotten all tables, and we're back to. Do you have a question? I'll let you talk through the mic so everybody can hear it.
From our friends in the interweb, will there be a substantial green component to Sinead? And if so, how substantial? If not, why not?
I think the answer is, from our point of view, is yes, there will be a green component. We don't know what it is, between open space, water management, watershed management. There's a lot of opportunities for creating green components. In our biggest project in San Francisco, we're building a 5-acre public park in the development and gifting it back to the city. So, yeah, we always include green elements.
I'm just trying to find out the actual number. I thought it was in the range of 30 or more acres of parcel J. Parcel J is 12. That's happening, okay? That's happening. We already voted on that. We're just waiting for the open space to do their easement. There's already an easement that was there for ag and open space, and then there's another parcel that is for flood control through the water agency. So okay, so the water agency is 41 acres? So if you add the 41 acres plus parcel J, which is 12, and then whatever the other smaller open easement, I think it's over 50 acres then. So that's not going to be built. Those are easements in perpetuity, but they will go along Paulin Creek. So whoever wants to operate that as a park, it will be pretty substantial.
Okay, thank you.
This is a little bit of a follow-up or additional question, a little bit of a hybrid, so sorry in advance. But one thing was, you mentioned that the benefit to the community is the affordable housing and any additional rental cash or so forth. Two parts to this question. One is, depending on what the study comes back as saying, okay, you can basically build a maximum of this many housing or dwelling units in the area because of all these restrictions. What would the threshold have to be, the minimum threshold have to be for you to say it's even worth doing? And secondly, with this additional money, property taxes are specifically guided as to what they're spent on. I don't see anything saying that this additional money falls into that same category, so I see that as general money that the county can do whatever they want with. Is there some sort of, I don't know, framework in place to say that that money that's going to be generated in a more novel way than through property tax actually gets used to pay for the same burdens that property tax pays for?
So, yeah, I'll take part A. Part A is, I don't know if there's a minimum number. It's a couple of hundred units, 200 or 300 units would be the minimum, beyond which it makes no sense to do the project.
So sort of a two-part, there's a question also surrounding about schools and how schools are paid for. In this sort of situation, schools are backfilled by the state under Prop 98. So there isn't a loss of property tax revenue to schools when there is an affordable housing project. So that's just something to be aware of. So that's, I think, the answer to your question. The dollars that come in that result, the public cash that Lou talked about, those are general fund discretionary dollars. It's up to the Board of Supervisors to determine how those funds are utilized. And, you know, we're talking years down the road. There'll be a future board that'll be making those decisions.
Thank you. So we're going around again. Hopefully we'll make the round before our 7 o'clock. If you don't get a chance to ask your question, submit them, leave them with us, and we will get them posted and get them answered for you.
I've heard numerous times that we don't really have a project here, yet the evaluation of the 3 proposals specifically identified a project that included 500 different units, up to 700, but the pro forma had 500 in it. So I just want to try and understand how much weight that pro forma had, because we don't have a project, we don't know how many units are going to actually be authorized under the planning process, and I'm concerned that that pro forma may have been too heavily weighted in the process.
In terms of using it as a decision criteria. Yeah, okay.
As I mentioned, the California Government Code, the Surplus Property Act, gave us criteria that we had to use when evaluating between the multiple offers. And that criteria is the amount of affordable housing and the percentage of, or the depth of affordability. Those are the criteria. We also looked at the cash offer, or the value of the offer, and we looked at equity. We looked at equity from a theoretical perspective, because the pro forma, to create a pro forma, you have to choose a number to base it on. But that is entirely a theoretical construct at this point in time, because there is no project. And there, until you all work with Build and CalCHA and go through a process to determine, and with the city, determine how many units could potentially be built, we won't know what the actual dollar value of that public equity is. But we know that there will be public equity. As Lou said, the property will come back to the county. We have an option at year 15, and eventually it will come back to the county. We know there will be public equity. So it wasn't a huge component of the valuation, again, because we were looking at what we had to utilize under the Act, the amount of affordability and the depth or degree of affordability. Those were the 2 primary things. Yes, I mean, public equity and the fact that we could share in the upside of the property, as I mentioned earlier, of course we care about that. But we didn't fix in on the numbers because they're theoretical. Who knows what the numbers will actually be.
So we're going from this table to this one.
Is it possible to change the course of this whole proposal thing to stop it and have the community try to approach open space agencies to cobble together a bid that would create a park here, so that we could not have any of these factors mitigating? So is it still possible?
So we, as I said, we noticed it publicly. It went out to all 650, I think it was, different agencies twice. Oh, correct. This is the second time we noticed it. So we didn't get any offers. You know, for parks and open space.
Community blowback, and I think that maybe you guys need to stop with the housing part, because a lot of us see this as the wrong place and the wrong time, but you're not hearing us. And I think that that was clear at the last meeting I attended with the last big proposal, which seemed pretty ludicrous to me. So I understand this now, but this would have been great 30 years ago if you'd come up with it, but you didn't. So now it's the wrong place, wrong time. Why not think about what people keep suggesting, which is to use the space differently and to try and go after those places where you could realize that dream and not have to worry about the traffic and the fire danger and all that other stuff.
So I think I heard that you were also bound by law to try to dispose of it, and you followed your process. Yeah, okay.
Thanks.
Just to clarify, so under California law, when a governmental entity does not have a purpose for the property, we are required to surplus the property. So we are in a path because we have no government use for the property. We didn't receive a bid from any, or an offer from any park entity. So there is no park entity out there that is coming forward and saying, we would like to buy the 75 acres that are available for sale.
Good. So no matter who buys the property, will the county require the purchaser to take over the maintenance immediately, the $800,000 a year that, Supervisor Ravitch kept commenting about? Or is there a scenario where the taxpayers will continue to pay that sum for a period of time?
Until a property sale is actually executed, until we have a purchase and sale agreement executed by the Board of Supervisors and by the purchaser, the taxpayer will be footing the bill for the maintenance. Once the property transfers to the buyer, then we will not be in that situation anymore. And just to clarify, the $800,000 a year that we're spending is not maintenance per se. It is security expenses, because this building behind us here had all the copper stolen out of it. There are no operating fire sprinklers in that building anymore. We have 24/7 fire watch on that building. We were having copper harvesting that is going on in other buildings. We have vagrants and homeless encampments that are starting on this property that we are spending taxpayer dollars to go up and to try to address those situations. We have vegetation management that we are trying to make sure that this property doesn't become a fire hazard. There are a number of things that we are spending funds on, in addition to managing the buildings in a what we call warm shutdown space. All of those things are what add up to, and security costs are what add up to the $800,000. We are constantly having to redo the doors and windows because folks are breaking into the buildings. So it's been very expensive to hold on to this property.
Yes, I'd like to know what it means that the county would take back ownership in 15 years. Does that mean the county then becomes the landlord for all of the 100% rental units that are being proposed right now?
Thank you. And maybe Lou will help me out on this one a little bit. But so the way that the proposal was structured, there is an opportunity at year 15 for the county to acquire back the improved property, so with a rental income stream from folks who are living in the units. There is a market. So one of the options, there's like 3 options. One is that the county retains the property and becomes the landlord, as you say, and works to continue to maintain and work with the folks who live in the property. The second is that the county has the opportunity to refinance the bonded indebtedness at that point, and then either retain it or resell it. The third option is to just immediately turn around and resell the property. And there is a market for investors and people who want to acquire, generally they're affordable housing providers, who want to purchase existing affordable housing developments in order to continue. It's a solid revenue stream that they would gain, and for the benefit of providing affordable housing. There are a number of protections that are included in how you ensure that that property has been maintained, and that when it would come back to the county, it would come back as a improved and well-maintained asset. So that's one of the provisions that we will be working with Lou and his team on.
Great questions, neighbors. Thank you. Can you guys hang in there? Three more questions. We'll get 3 more tables.
Hi again. So a project of 500 to 750 homes will require a new elementary school, which would be a cost of $32 million for the school board. With no income for property taxes, how will this be paid for?
Thank you.
That's one of those questions that I don't have an answer for. We don't have a project right now, so we don't know how many units will actually be on the property. Your question assumes a certain number of units, which we don't know what the project will eventually look like. So that is something that you all will be very much involved in as we go forward.
2 more questions.
So for 18 years, you knew that the Sutter Hospital was going to leave, and still you didn't prepare to tear down the buildings, and that's why we're getting this $800,000 a year cost put on to taxpayers. I don't understand that thought process at all.
Is there an answer for that? Why not action sooner?
It's a very good question. There are a number of elected officials that have served on the Board of Supervisors over the last 15 years, and as you all know, in this community, there are many, many needs. I can say in general, our facility needs are secondary to the primary mission of the county, which is the delivery of health and human services and public safety. And so one of the challenges that we have, and I use this opportunity to lobby my supervisor, but one of the challenges that we have as property managers for the county is that we recognize that every dollar, every tax dollar, the highest and best use of those tax dollars is oftentimes services and not facilities. So, and that's right. And so when we don't invest in facilities, just as you all know with your own homes, if you defer maintenance on something like replacing a roof, those type of things, then it comes back. And so, and that's the situation that we're in. Unfortunately, I can't explain the decisions that were made by prior, administrations and prior elected officials. Here's the situation we're in, and we do need to sell this property and move along.
We're going to pick up one more question at this table, and then we'll move to close.
Tom Brown, this is probably a question for Mr. Velasquez. Will the bond money be available to fund the public infrastructure that's created by this project? And if so, that's part of what the bond yields, and that goes back to this question of how big a project can you have if these costs are really high?
I'm not absolutely sure, so I hesitate to answer that, but I believe that the bond will be restricted to improvements on the property, not in the public right-of-way, but I don't know that for sure. So that's, when I get more information, I can answer that.
So a couple things. These are not easily answered questions, so good job to all of you for asking the hard questions. I also want to thank our public servants doing the best job. Everybody's showing up, trying to do the very best job they can in a difficult situation. They're going to stick around a few minutes afterwards, so if you want to talk with them, you can. Please, I know there's some unanswered questions. One question per white card, and leave them with Michelle. Michelle, wave your hand. Leave them with Michelle at the door. She can get them up on the website so you can find answers to those questions. And thank you, panelists. Really appreciate it. We have another session tomorrow night. Welcome you either to come back, sign up in advance, or to join us on the webinar. Thank you all for participating.